Good morning, everybody. Wanted to thank George also for and Syncrosoft for organizing this event. I've already found it very useful for myself. My name's Tim Grantham. I'm the senior publishing consultant for my company, Tengwar Systems. And what I'm going to talk about today may be very obvious, but it wasn't initially obvious to me. So I'm just going to go through it. It's very short, obviously 15 minutes. So if you have any questions after the presentation, I'll also be doing another presentation at the regular conference Tuesday morning. But if, by all means, come and see me if you have questions. I have this very special name card that I got from George, which is the only one that's in green ink. So I should be easy to spot. Can everybody hear me all right? Thank you. So what do I mean by post-preprocessing? Post-preprocessing is hooking in to the pre-processing stage of the DTA-OT toolkit, and so you're creating an insertion point. It's called an extension point in the OT, but it's a place where you can run transformation code after the Open Toolkit has completed its pre-processing stage, so you have all your normalized topics. But before it then goes on to further downstream to whatever your transformation topic.
You said post-processing, not post-preprocessing, right?
No, it's actually post-preprocessing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you said post-processing on the slide. That's
Oh, you're right. Thank you. Okay.
The distinction, I mean.
That's what comes from creating slides at 1 o'clock in the morning. So yes, post-preprocessing, excuse me. So this is a place where you've got all the topics, they're all normalized, but now you can do something before it heads further downstream. I didn't come up with this idea myself. It actually came out of a discussion with an information architect who knew nothing about the DTA-OT toolkit. But when I was explaining to him what the processing flow is in the DTA-OT toolkit, he said, well, why don't, you can put something in there and we can simplify the processing. And at the time I went, duh, why didn't I think of this before? Is anybody else doing this sort of thing? Okay, so about a fifth of the audience, perhaps. So let's go into this a little more. So as I explained, this is transformation code that runs after the standard OT preprocessing, but before the output type specific code. So before the actual PDF or HTML transformations run. It uses the OT specific extension point for this, depend.preprocess.post, and it runs every time you publish, no matter what the transformation type is. And I have tripped over this a couple of times, forgetting that this runs every time, no matter what your target output type is, your trans type. So that's tripped me up with a couple of things I didn't expect. So that has to be kept in mind. So why use it? This first sort of came to me in this kind of use case from an information architect. This is the default PDF output that the toolkit generates for definition lists. So it has the term in bold on the left, and then the rest of the output of the definition can't remember what the second D stands for.
Description.
Thank you. On the right. And he wanted it to be instead like this. A bulleted list with the term in bold at the beginning, followed by a colon. So the publishing would have to insert the colon. Then the content of the first following element, which is usually a paragraph. And then if there's more content to the DD element, it would be rendered below. And he wanted this kind of styling for both the PDF and the HTML outputs. So rather than write code for the PDF one and code for the HTML output, I put this into this post-preprocessing stage. And the way I did this was to actually convert the definition list element to an unordered list element. And that way, by doing that, I didn't have to do any subsequent styling because the built-in default styling for unordered lists will generate this output. So this is an example, but of why you would use post-preprocessing, not post-processing. So you use it to convert content so that you can use the toolkit's default styling of other elements. But there are other things you can do with this too. The obvious one is eliminate duplicate code across transformation types. Often you end up, if you don't do this, you're having to create similar code for your PDF outputs and the HTML outputs. So if you can, in most cases you can because the code's similar, just create a single transformation that is in this post-preprocessing stage. And then you can minimize what you have to do to differentiate if you need to do any differentiation between your PDF and your HTML outputs. Oh yes, clean up topics and maps. This comes about, where it's come about for me is the authoring templates will often contain empty elements that the authors are expected to fill in, like short description, and perhaps some specialized elements. But then the authors don't delete them if they don't use them. So you still have these empty elements in your data source. So rather than, again, having to deal with this in each trans type, but you use your post-preprocessing to remove those empty elements. It even applies to maps too. I've had authoring templates for maps that contained topic refs in them with no href attribute value. And they're not being used as topic heads. They're just in there because the authors are expected to actually supply an href attribute value. They don't bother with it, they leave it in. And yeah, you can deal with it further downstream, but it's easier to deal with it here. And to restructure content. A simple example of this is with figures and table elements. The content model for those require that if there is a title element, it must be the first child element in figure and table. And the default rendering places the title then above the image that's in that figure element or above the table that's rendered at output. But if in your post-preprocessing, you can actually then move your title element to the end instead of having it at the beginning. Now, I can't remember exactly if you have to turn validation off in the toolkit to enable that to publish, but this is one, I think you probably have to do that. Robert, do you know? Okay. Well, that enables you to have the title come after the image or after the table, and you don't have to actually code that into your PDF or HTML customizations. I mentioned this before, but you have to make sure that you remember that you're working with normalized topics and maps, not the standard source ones. So the normalized ones contain resolved conrefs and keys and things like that, but they also contain the debugging attributes and ID values that may not have been in the original data source. So you have to keep in mind that you're going to have to deal with, have a mindful awareness of those things. If you're converting content from one element to another element, you have to, of course, to remember to change the original element's attribute, class attribute value to what is required for the element that you're converting to. Also, you have to take a look at any other attributes that are on the original element and make sure that you are aware of changes you might have to make. Not just blindly copy through all the other attributes and their values to the new element. Do we, George, a couple minutes for questions? Okay, yeah. So are there any questions about that? Okay, thank you.